Cyclops, Sirens, Scylla. You know the names. You've heard the stories. Epic adventures pegged with grotesque beasts and terrifying gods. And you've probably been told that they're just myths. But what if there's more to the story? What if these weren't just campfire tales? What if they were warnings, coded guides to survival in a world far more brutal and frightening than we can imagine? What if Homer, the great poet of ancient Greece, wasn't just spinning fantasies, but was translating real-world fears into unforgettable monsters? For thousands of years we've seen these creatures as fiction. But what if, buried beneath the poetry, lies a secret history of what ancient sailors were really afraid of? In this video, we're going to explore the stunning real-world phenomena that may have inspired the monsters of the Odyssey and uncover the history hidden in the heart of the myth. It's one of the most famous stories ever told. Odysseus and his men, desperate for supplies, stumble upon a massive cave. It's the home of Polyphemus, a Cyclops, a hulking one-eyed giant who respects no laws and no gods. He traps the sailors and begins to eat them raw. In a brilliant act of cunning, Odysseus gets the giant drunk, tells him his name is Nobody, and then blinds him with a sharp and burning stake. As the monster roars, his fellow giants ask who hurt him. "Nobody has hurt me," he screams, and the Greeks escape by clinging to the bellies of the giant sheep. A one-eyed giant is about as mythical as it gets, right? But what if the key to this monster wasn't in mythology, but in paleontology? This is a modern theory, first proposed in the early 20th century by paleontologist Othenio Abel. He suggested that the myth could have been born from a simple, dramatic mistake. Across Mediterranean islands like Sicily and Crete, the ground holds fossilized skulls of prehistoric dwarf elephants. Now imagine you're an ancient Greek sailor. You find a cave, and inside you discover an enormous skull, maybe twice the size of a human head. And right in the center is a single, huge, gaping hole. You've likely never seen an elephant. You have no idea what a nasal cavity for a trunk looks like. All you see is a massive skull with a single, terrifying eye socket. What else could it be but the remains of a giant? While we don't have ancient records specifically connecting these fossils to the Cyclops, we do know that Greeks who found other large, strange bones declared them to be the remains of a race of giants. Faced with monstrous bones, the ancient mind could easily build a monster. But the Cyclops wasn't just a physical monster, he was a social one too. Polyphemus is described as a lawless brute. He lives alone, he has no community, and he rejects hospitality, a sacred custom for the Greeks. He's the ultimate outsider, representing brute force without civilization. For Greek sailors whose survival depended on networks of trade and kindness, the greatest danger wasn't just a storm, it was landing on a hostile shore among strangers who didn't share their values. The Cyclops was the personification of that savage frontier, a monster born from a fossil, perhaps, but also the terrifying face of the unknown stranger. After escaping the Cyclops, Odysseus faces a danger that's psychological. He has to sail past the island of the Sirens. The sorceress Circe warns him that their song is so beautiful, so hypnotic, that no sailor can resist it. They lure ships to crash upon the rocks, leaving behind a meadow piled high with the skeletons of their victims. Following Circe's advice, Odysseus plugs his crew's ears with beeswax. But his own curiosity is too much to bear. He orders his men to tie him to the ship's mast, commanding them not to release him, no matter how much he begs. As they sail past, Odysseus hears it, a sound of pure, irresistible beauty. He screams and pleads with his men to untie him and steer towards his own doom. But his crew just binds him tighter, rowing until the song fades and Odysseus' sanity returns. We often picture the Sirens as beautiful mermaids, but in ancient Greece they were usually depicted as unsettling bird-woman hybrids. And their temptation was far more complex than just a pretty voice. In the Odyssey, the Sirens don't just sing a nice tune, they sing a song of knowledge. They promise to tell Odysseus everything that happened at Troy, and all that comes to pass on the fertile earth. Theirs is the lure of forbidden knowledge, the promise of a godlike understanding of everything. It's a temptation that could drive a person to abandon their journey, their family, and their life, all for the obsession of knowing. That meadow of bones isn't just a graveyard of sailors. It's a graveyard of people paralyzed by fatal curiosity. Of course, there were likely physical dangers here too. It's easy to imagine how this story might have been inspired by real treacherous coastlines in the Mediterranean, places with sharp rocks where a moment's distraction could be fatal. Some have theorized the song could have been a metaphor for disorientating winds whistling through rock formations, or even the mesmerizing calls of bird colonies that could throw off a ship's navigation. Sirens represent a profound truth. The most dangerous temptations often promise us exactly what we think we want. They embody distraction, obsession, and the self-destructive desire to know things we aren't meant to. Odysseus survives not by fighting, but by recognizing his own weakness and preparing for it. He ties himself to the mast, choosing to endure the madness rather than give in, a timeless lesson in navigating the irresistible calls that threaten to pull all of us off course. Perhaps the most visceral terror in the Odyssey isn't a single monster, but a geographical death trap. After the Sirens, Odysseus has to navigate a narrow strait with a horror waiting on each side. On one side looms Scylla, a creature with 6 long necks and 12 feet with dog heads barking from her waist. From her cave high in the cliffs, she snatches sailors from the decks of passing ships, one for each of her 6 heads. On the other side is Charybdis. She isn't a creature so much as a living whirlpool, a monstrous vortex that sucks down the sea 3 times a day and spits it back out, swallowing ships whole. Circe's warning to Odysseus is chilling. He cannot win. He can only choose which horror to face. She advises him to sail closer to Scylla. Better to lose 6 men, she says, than to lose the entire ship and everyone on board. Here the line between myth and geography gets incredibly thin. For centuries, scholars and sailors have pointed to one location, the Strait of Messina, the narrow, treacherous canal separating Sicily from mainland Italy. Even today, the powerful currents and whirlpools in this strait are notoriously dangerous for small boats. To the ancient Greeks in their much simpler ships, this passage would have seemed a place of certain doom. The sheer cliffs on the Italian side could easily become the lair of Scylla, a personification of jagged rocks, and the very real whirlpools on the Sicilian side would become Charybdis, a monster representing the sea's power to swallow you whole. Homer turned a real navigational hazard into one of the most powerful metaphors in literature. To be between Scylla and Charybdis is to make an idiom we still use for being caught between 2 terrible choices. But for Odysseus, it is a brutal test of leadership. He is forced to make a calculated, agonizing decision. Consciously sacrifice a part of his crew to save the whole. He steers clear of the whirlpool, and just as predicted, Scylla's heads strike, plucking 6 of his best men from the deck. Odysseus calls their screams as they were lifted into the air the most pitiful thing he ever saw. He made the right choice and saved his ship, but he had to live with the cost. Scylla represents the horror of necessary loss, while Charybdis is the alternative, total annihilation, the seductive risk of trying to save everyone and ending up with nothing. The Cyclops, possibly inspired by a fossil skull and the fear of the uncivilized. The Sirens, a psychological trap disguised as a beautiful song. Scylla and Charybdis, a real-world death trap turned into a lesson on impossible choices. When you peel back the layers of the myth, the Odyssey reveals itself as more than just a fantasy. It's a poetic map of the ancient world's dangers and the fears of its people. It shows us that Homer's monsters weren't just invented, they were interpretations. They were the language of seafaring people used to make sense of a world filled with hostile lands, psychological temptations, and deadly geography. These stories have survived for 3,000 years, not just because they are fantastic, but because they feel true in a way that matters. They reveal our timeless human need to create monsters out of the things we can't understand, and to turn our greatest fears into stories. The monsters of the Odyssey are scary not because they are inhuman, but because they show us so much about what it means to be human, flawed, tempted, and forced to carry on in a world that is often unforgiving. The ancient terror was real, and its echoes are still with us today. Which of these real-world origins did you find most surprising? And what other myths do you think are hiding a secret truth? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to keep unmasking the hidden stories behind our world's greatest histories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe.